In designing my poster, I took into account the codes and conventions of posters of the horror genre. These were The Last Exorcism, The Others, 28 Days Later, and Nightmare on Elm Street. I found that these used a muted colour palette of greys and blacks, and therefore I used a background of dark grey in my poster. This is conventional of the horror genre, as it suggests the unknown, darkness, and the night, referencing Bart's Enigma code. I also found that these posters, particularly The Last Exorcism and 28 Days Later, used red to suggest violence. Because of this, I downloaded a bloodstain brush from the internet and used this on the background of my poster. To gain information from my target audience, I used Facebook to post a questionnaire while handing out other questionnaires at college. I wanted to produce a promotional package aimed at an older teenage market with a certificate of 18, and therefore I limited my research to 17 to 19-year-olds. The first question I asked was which colour palette they thought would look best on a horror movie poster, and they chose reds and blacks, which connote violence. I used this feedback and gave my poster a dark background and image, as this feedback was also consistent with the conventions shown in the real media products that I analysed. Through looking at conventions, I found it was conventional to include a close or mid shot of the characters, as this presents the audience with an initial idea about the victims or the villains and allows them to empathise with or fear them. Through my audience feedback, I also learned that the audience preferred the villain to be the focus of the poster. However, I found that this was not conventional by looking at real media products, and that the victims were most often shown on the poster. As I wanted my product to be consistent with what I had learnt through my analyses, I therefore decided not to use this feedback. My questionnaire results showed that the location and character development were very important to the audience. However, through analysing real media products, I found that the focus was more on the characters than the location, as in The Others and Last Exorcism the location remained unknown, which I thought was effective, as it created a sense of disorientation and fear. Therefore, I decided to use feedback selectively in order to remain consistent with codes and conventions, and therefore kept a focus on the characters. In referencing Todorov's theory, I found that these films showed the disequilibrium of the treatment, and as I showed the characters at a point of distress, I used this convention to show the climax of the story. I used an image of the male and female characters, with the female character being driven to commit suicide by the spirit she is possessed with. This also applies Bart's Enigma code, as the viewer wonders whether the couple will go through with the suicide and what has driven them to this. This references the hypodermic syringe model, as the audience relates to the characters that are presented as weak, disorientated, and vulnerable. Following my treatment change, this shows the audience some of the storyline, as well as being conventional in that it shows some aspects of violence. My questionnaire results showed that location and character development were very important to the audience. I also learnt that facial expression and pose were very important in character development, as was a focus on image. Therefore, I used a pose of the character to reveal some of the treatment. The way the two characters are standing shows the friendship between the two, appealing to the teen target market. The fact that the female character is holding a gun to her own head shows she is defeated, allowing the audience to sympathise with her. Therefore, I attempted to greatly take this feedback into account, as it was consistent with the codes and conventions I had learned. Posters of movies whose target demographic was aimed at teenagers or young adults, such as The Last Exorcism and 28 Days Later, used a graphic, cartoonish effect on images of the individuals, which looked a bit like graffiti. As my target demographic was teenagers and young people, I used this effect on the image of the characters by using the diffusing tool to create an urban edgy effect. I found that white font was most conventional in real media products, as it provided a contrast against the dark background, and therefore I used white except for putting the 18 in red, which reinforced the theme of blood and violence. For the taglines, I used a font similar to that of The Others and The Last Exorcism, which was thin and reminiscent of Victorian type, which was a period associated with horror. However, for the title, I used a font similar to that of 28 Days Later, which was distressed, large and bold, which I believe would appeal more to a teenage audience. Therefore, I challenged this convention, as only one of the posters I analysed used this style of font. I also found that in most of the posters I analysed, the font were in uppercase letters. I found that the tagline used to intrigue the viewer often referenced Bart's Enigma code. For example, the tagline of the Nightmare on Elm Street poster was "Every story has a beginning." This leaves the audience wondering what the beginning will be. Therefore, I used the tagline "The only escape is death," leading the audience to wonder what would drive the character to this. In planning my poster, I used the internet to research existing media products, similar to the poster I wanted to create. I also used the internet to conduct internet research into the codes and conventions of the horror genre. In constructing my poster, I used a digital camera to take the photo for the image. I then used Photoshop to put the poster together. To create the background, I used a fill of grey, then downloaded a bloodstains brush tool from the internet to add effect. I also downloaded a font from the internet, which I felt fit with the genre more effectively due to its distressed, bold style. I then used a diffuse tool on my image to give it a more graphic effect. For the billing block, I downloaded a font, Steel Tongs, from defont.com. I also used Microsoft Word in analyses and planning work.